You're listening to the Decidedly podcast with Sanger Smith and Sean Smith. Our mission is to help business owners like you defeat bad decision-making so you can improve your health, wealth, and relationships. We do this by digging deep into the stories and expertise of our guests and distilling their knowledge into actionable wisdom for you to carry into your life and business. If you're new to the show, welcome. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of our weekly episodes. If you prefer to watch this week's episode, head on over to YouTube for the full video. Now, let's get into this week's episode and defeat bad decision-making in your life and business.
How often are you aware that people are different from you?
Well, other than every day?
Yeah. I mean, you go through life and you have your own perspective. And do you become conscious that people are taking a different viewpoint than you?
Of course. Yeah. Anytime I go to a financial advisor conference.
So what do you mean?
I feel like the people are motivated by different things. There are some people that are motivated to kind of have their own, they just want to work part-time basically.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really want to like innovate.
Yeah.
Some people are at the conference so they can get a bunch of free food and go to and stay at a hotel on the beach or whatever. You know,
right.
They're just kind of there to party.
Yeah.
There are some people that want to take over the world and make as much money as possible.
I think there's certainly different motivations for things like that. I'm talking about more at a fundamental level on how they behave. I have a friend of mine, Derek Kinney, I was just on his podcast and he's on ours, and he tends to approach things differently than I do. So he's very people oriented, right? So I started to notice.
Yeah, we aren't that way.
No, I'm not. All right. So we've talked about the clothes we wear. It tends to be very dressed down, and I'm trying not to attract attention, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the other way, right? So
he's eye-catching.
Yeah. And there are people like that who will dress in ways where you notice them,
mm-hmm.
but then everything else about them backs that up. They always have a circle of people around them. They're never by themselves. They're very people focused.
I tried that once. I got bathing apes in middle school.
You got what?
Bathing apes.
I have no idea what that is.
There are these Japanese shoe, sneaker. They were really, you remember Soulja Boy?
Yeah.
So he kind of made them.
Are you proud of me for that?
Yeah. Well,
okay. Impressed?
A little bit.
All right.
Yeah, it's like a 6 out of 10 on how impressed I am.
Okay.
You remember his like most famous song?
Is that the Superman song?
Yeah, Crank That Soulja Boy.
That's
so they said, I got me some bathing apes.
Oh, okay. All right. So there you go. So you were with the pop culture.
Oh, it was at the time.
Okay.
It was at its height. Yeah.
Okay.
They're very brightly colored sneakers.
Yeah. All right.
Like neon.
Oh, I remember these. Okay.
They had a star on the side.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, they were from Japan, and Bapes, you might call them.
Okay.
For short.
For all the kids.
And I was like, I need to get me some bathing apes.
Okay.
And so I did. And I got an overwhelming amount of attention.
Yeah, you don't really want attention.
No, look at what we're wearing: khakis and
a solid color shirt,
blue shirt. Yeah, I'm trying to blend in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's interesting. So that didn't work out for you. You didn't like it.
No, I couldn't pull off the Derek Kinney look. No, not at all. But we're all different and we're all unique.
Yeah,
and our guest today helps us dig into that, understand our own unique motivations, and make sure that when we're building a team, we know how the motivations of different people create a diverse team that can be unified in a higher calling, not a collection of individuals warring with each other over their differences. So Thomas Erikson's a renowned expert and author in human behavior. He teaches self-awareness skills that help leaders navigate relationships with people who seem to drive them crazy sometimes. He uses the DISC assessment to guide his approach and then goes deeper beyond that. So if you're unfamiliar with the DISC assessment's a model that analyzes human behavior, kind of breaks people down into 4 primary personality characteristics: dominance, influence, stability, and compliance, or DISC. Erikson's introduced 4 corresponding colors, so it makes it a little bit easier for me anyway to identify individuals with their primary traits. So he breaks it down from red, yellow, green, and blue. Red, dominant, commandeering individuals. Yellow are influential, people-oriented. Green are stable, friendly. Blue are precise and analytical. So as you're listening to our conversation with Thomas, remember those 4 colors, those 4 codes, see where you fit within that group and see where the people who you have conflict with in that dynamic. I think you'll learn a lot from this conversation that we had. I'm Sanger Smith. I'm with my dad, Sean Smith, and this is Decidedly. Thomas, when I first saw the title of your book, I thought our producer had written an autobiography.
Oh, that Morgan was surrounded by idiots, and we were the idiots.
I thought she was lashing out.
Well, the thing is, we are all the idiot in somebody's story, right? That is the case, I'm afraid.
Exactly. It's been hard to come to grips with that now that I've learned that concept from you. I think a lot of people see this and they're like, yes, finally Thomas understands that everybody in my life just can't get it together. And it's, we're equally frustrated and the source of someone else's frustration.
Yeah, it is a tough pill to swallow when you read a book that you think is talking about how all the other people are idiots, and then you realize it's talking about how you are the other people to somebody.
So I'm in recovery emotionally.
Yeah, I see. There's an interesting thing actually. What I have discovered throughout my 25-something years working with the concept in the book, that is indeed the case that some people actually are surrounded by more idiots than others. It's not an equal thing, really. Some people are indeed in trouble, and so I'm sort of forcing the book onto those people and see if I can make them read it.
Who's more likely to be surrounded by more idiots than others?
Well, impatient people, because everybody's too slow. You have one of them on the front cover of the book. I can see it from here. I mean, we don't have to go into details, but what I call the red character, they are usually surrounded by more idiots than others because people are just too slow, That is usually the problem. And talk too much and act too little. So, yeah. Of course, I'm joking a little bit, but not much.
Sean and I both struggle with that. I think we're lean more to the red character traits. And anything short of perfection, we're like, oh gosh, this guy can't get it together. Come on, man.
Guy's an idiot.
Geez, make a decision, dude. And shockingly, other people aren't like that. It is off-putting. I remember being out to dinner with a friend of mine, Steve, and the waiter was just so slow and, forgetting our order and this and that and the other thing. And I was like really trying to keep it to myself, but I guess I wasn't. And he goes, hey man, you're kind of ruining the night for everyone else. Like, just chill out. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, man.
Man, that was right to the heart.
I thought we were all commiserating because this person was bad at their job, but no. Everybody else was capable of having a good night regardless, except me.
Interesting. I'm going to take notes, I can tell, because that's a good story. I think I'm going to write it down.
All right.
I'm collecting good stories, good observations from the real world.
So what happened early in your life that led you to become interested in studying human behavior?
Well, it actually started in my managing career. I took on my first... Well, I would say my first managing position at the age of 24. I was really smart at the time. I knew everything. Turns out after 6-8 months, perhaps, that I don't know anything. Everything people came to me with, and I said, well, fix it. And they said, well, how about this? Well, fix it. Well, how about that? Well, fix it. And they usually started to say, you don't know anything, do you? And I said, well, I know a lot. I'm here. I'm managing, but you don't know anything. And I said, well, what do you mean? Well, you can't help us. You're here to help me. It's more of a sort of a strange conundrum there. And And I actually went to my boss's boss 2 levels up and said, this isn't working. You better take me out of this equation because I figured out I actually don't know what I'm doing. And he said, his response was, you better stay put, Sonny, because your boss is even worse than you. He's not even here. So after about 1 year, I managed to get myself out of there. And when you sit around a coffee table, that your last day, you have some cake, they hand you some presents and they wish you best of luck on your future career. They didn't give me anything. I gave them a plant basically and said, I'm sorry. I messed it up. I totally messed it up. And then the HR department called me up. This was in a big bank. I'm an ex-banker. So they called me up and said, would you fancy a personality test? And I said, sure. I'm a willing learner. Of course I want to do that. So I filled in a questionnaire and I got a report, 24 pages, if I recall correctly. It was a horrible read because it showed me the truth about me. And I said, is this what people see when I present myself to them? And they say, would you like to talk about it? And I said, I better do that. That's where it actually started. Let's say I was 25 by the time. As you can see, that's many years ago. But I'm still, an avid, constant learner when it comes to behaviors and when it comes to learning things about me. I'm studying myself still 30 years later, and still I'm discovering things I didn't know. Wow, that's an interesting reaction. Well, how come? I think it's fascinating. I think self-awareness is maybe possibly the best way to go about when it comes to dealing with anyone, anywhere, I would say.
Yeah, self-awareness is it's crucial for growth. I can't be a good leader if I don't know what my weaknesses are and I don't know how I'm going to show up on my worst day. A lot of times, something that someone told me a long time ago is we judge other people by their actions and we judge ourselves by our intentions. And that's a real impediment to self-awareness is, I'm doing my best, but this guy, he just missed the mark. His report's not on time. That's because he doesn't care. My report's not on time because I was trying to make it perfect.
I had a reason to mess it up. It's the same thing. We all use ourselves as some sort of let's say, blueprint, some sort of role model. This is the way to do it. And they were impatient, those idiots. They should just have waited for the perfection to just occur, So we all have excuses. People usually make excuses. I did that too. It took me, I think I was in my 40s before I started to really take responsibility for my own actions because it was just too painful, to look at yourself. You messed up. You have to, clean up now.
When they did this assessment of you when you were 25 after you left the company, what did you learn about yourself that made you really pause and reflect deeper?
I kept there was some really hands-on stuff, such as I kept my mouth running all the time. I talked too much, used too many words. I'm still one of these super impatient people that is quite annoying to the people surrounding me. I know that for a fact. I am very impatient, too impatient. But at the same time, I am also a perfectionist. It's a struggle for me because I like to push the accelerator and the brakes at the same time. And it doesn't work. Everything's got to be done yesterday in perfect shape, which is obviously completely, I hear what it sounds like. It sounds really silly. I understand that. But still, I wanted things to be really good, really fast. And that's just impossible. And just by trying to make everybody do it like that, that really, it didn't work at all. And it didn't work for me. The stress was enormous. I had super high levels of stress for decades, I would say. But I learned to calm myself down. And now I'm not patient, no, but I can keep myself calm. It's actually two different things, right? Keeping myself calm, that's an action. Being impatient is a personality trait. So I'm dealing with my impatience by keeping myself calm. Just keep it cool. And it works pretty much, I would say. Okay.
Getting to that, kind of like what you were talking about a second, getting to that point of self-awareness, I think is key. And when we look at having that perspective that the things that annoy us in other people they have that same perspective. They're looking at us and not trying to emulate us more. They're not saying, boy, I wish I was like him. They're as annoyed by me as I am by them. How did you land on this particular approach to personality segmentation or identification of the basic types? Could you kind of walk through as background what that assessment is and how the different categories are identified?
I can do it really quick because it's easy to get, deep into details here. But in general speaking, I mean, it's the old disc theory wrapped in colors: red, yellow, green, and blue. You have sort of a 2x2 matrix. You have extroversion versus introversion. You have task orientation versus people orientation, let's say. So you get sort of 4 boxes, but they are just the basics. It's like baking a cake. You need to understand the basic ingredients. So you have the red factor who is extrovert and task oriented. Then you have the yellow factor who is extroverted but people oriented. And then you have the green factor who is people oriented but introvert. And then finally the blue factor who is introvert and task oriented. But these are just the basic. People say you can't deal the whole society into 4 categories. Of course not. You can do it in probably 25,000 categories, subcategories. But these are the basics. You can be both red and blue at the same time, like myself. I don't recommend it, but you can. You can also try to be yellow and blue at the same time, which is even worse. That's really hard to wrap your head around. You don't know yourself very well until you understand why that is. But you can use this as sort of a framework to understand the basic when it comes to human behavior. I mean, if you meet somebody who is constantly interrupting, very, very keen on getting his things said and so on, and you have somebody who never opens his mouth at all, like you're running a business, you're out there selling, just understanding the basics. Some people want you to say yes to the cup of coffee. Some people will never offer you a cup of coffee because you're not here to drink coffee, right? You're here to steal their time, so, do it the best way you can, fastest way you can. Just by understanding these basics. Some people need to get asked, how was your weekend? Where are you going for a vacation? And if you don't do it in some circumstances, you're going to mess it up. And if you do it in another context, you're going to mess it up. But just understanding the basics will help you so much. You will get so far down the road, and you will, I would say, solve maybe 80-85% of all the communication issues that you have. But again, you have to start being true to yourself and understand who you are. Should you speed up or should you slow down? Depends on who you are.
If I'm building out a team, do you find that it is more optimal to surround myself with people like me that we will reduce conflict, or to put people in that sort of complement or are very different from myself?
That is, of course, the right question, Sean. I would say, generally speaking, diversity is good. It's great if you have different kind of perspectives, if you have extroverts and introverts, if you have people who are task-oriented and people who are, the people's people, let's say. It gives you a broader perspective when it comes to problem solving, much more interesting inputs from different points of view and so on. That is very, very useful. What you do also need in that case is a leader of the team that can deal with all these differences. Because if the leader is only, let's say, tilted to one side, he or she will sort of understand his buddies who is like him or her, but he will not understand the ones on the other side of the fence. So you need someone who is kind of, let's say, who have a broad perspective himself, quite flexible. If you have flexibility in the leadership, you can probably deal with it. It would absolutely be the best team, I would say. But that is when it comes to behaviors. That is what you can see on the surface. Beneath the surface, you have also drivers, motivators, and you can't see those. You can feel them, you can sense them if you talk for quite some time with an individual, because there are different let's say, workplace motivators. Some people are there to learn new stuff. They are theoretical ones. Some people are there for some practical, economical reason. Some people are there for they have a social driver. They're allowed to help people. Some people are traditional and so on and so forth. And here you should have people with let's say, with the same driver, because that means they are here for the same reason. There's just one exception. There is a driver called individualistic driver, which is the strive for power. And if you have too many of those in the team, well, you can figure the rest out yourself. But if you understand these things, you can build a team in a really, really smart and let's say, fruitful way. And people are going to be really, really efficient if you pay attention to these traits.
Do you find that a lot of those drivers will group around the same type of personality characteristic? In other words, are reds?
No correlation.
Okay.
We have millions of analysis to say that the correlation isn't there. The only thing that you can see, yellow people, meaning extroverted, people-oriented people, they tend to be a little bit more individualistic. It's a thin correlation, but you can measure it. But otherwise, no connection whatsoever. So that's something that you need to. That's why the recruitment process has to be quite good also, because you need to ask people specific questions to understand this.
Well, what type of questions would you ask to ascertain what internal drivers there are? Because it seems like that is a critical element to team cohesion. Right? So how do you get to that determination of what the drivers are?
Well, you need to know what you're looking for. You need to know why are you applying for this certain position. I mean, there's a difference between the States and Sweden, obviously. But in Sweden, it's actually not okay to talk about money, let's say. You can't say here, well, I'm here for the money. I'm going to make a lot of money. We understand people like money. We like money, but it's not okay in our society to talk about it. I think you're much better at actually saying, if you do this, I'm going to give you a huge bonus. You have to work hard I don't know, but we will pay you beautifully if you put in the hours. Here it's more like, it's a lovely office. I like the team. I like the purpose of the company. So we're a bit, softer on that perspective. But if you understand why are you applying for this job? If you're in the health industry, are you here to learn new things? Are you here to help people? If you want to become, a nurse or a doctor or whatever. If you're an entrepreneur, why are you doing this? Why didn't you just take any job? Why driving your own business? You have to work so hard. It's a risky business. You can't sleep at night. You're responsible for everything and everyone all the time. Why did you do it, right? You know why you run your business, but your employees, they don't own the business. Why would they join you in your team? They have a different reason for this.
Yeah.
I think you should just ask straightforward questions. Why are you here?
We can often be wrong with the assumption. I think from a business owner's perspective, if I'm hiring someone, like I want the dream ideal candidate to be purely motivated by the mission of my company. Like they've just been sitting around waiting their whole life to find a company that is aiming to
They just want to help you be successful.
They want to help me enact the mission that I've set out upon with this company. And they've just lucked into finding a company that's exactly done this and pursued this. And they never thought to pursue this specific mission on their own yet.
They don't even need the money.
But they bear, yeah, that's what I want, right? But that's not real.
Everybody isn't driven by money. That is absolutely the case. Some people are, some people are not. So
that everybody is not motivated by money.
Yeah, sure. Some people are, some people are not.
Absolutely. And I've seen so many business owners make the mistake of assuming, because maybe that business owner himself is very motivated by money, even if it's not his primary motivation. He's motivated by money. And so he assumes the only way that he can reward his team is to pay them more. And he ends up giving them something that they weren't looking for, rewarding them in a way that's not motivating for him, costing himself something that mattered a lot to him. And he got no extra utility, no motivation, nothing changed with that employee. They just keep doing the same job, and now they're getting more money to do it. When really what they wanted was more flexibility or more purpose in their work,
recognition,
or whatever it is, more autonomy within their role. There's so many things. I was at a conference in Colorado Springs. John and I were both there. I was having dinner one night, And there was this guy next to me. He was not the owner of his firm. He was an employee. And so he starts talking to me, asking a lot of questions. He's like, oh, so like when you did this, like, you know, what should you be thinking about when you're going independent? I'm like, why are you asking all these questions? He goes, well, I want to go independent too. Like, I want to start my own deal. And I go, oh, okay. And he said, like, he's asking me for tips. And the whole time I'm assuming that what he valued most was being able to be independent and autonomous and the things that motivated me. And so I'm giving him advice based on that. And I can see he's like pushing back. And in the conversation, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm where you will say you want to be, and you're asking me for advice and you're disagreeing with my advice. Like, shut up, you know, like listen to what I have to say. And then so finally I go, well, okay, dude, I mean, like, why do you want to be independent, right? You want to be independent so you can make the decisions. And he goes, no, I want to be independent so I can make more money. I was like, this is probably not the route for you. Embarking upon this journey of entrepreneurship purely for the money, you ought to stay an employee, man.
Sure. I mean, and you can't judge people by what they are driven by, because that comes from, you know, their family, or it comes from their upbringing or their attitude or opinions. It could be anything. It could change, though. Behaviors, as in, you know, dominant behavior or influential behavior or so on, those usually do not change, but the drivers can change. The motivators can change. If you win the lottery, then you're home free. You don't need more money. Then you can go out, you know, painting or you know, traveling the world or something. It doesn't mean anything. You don't need another million, let's say. So they can change, but it's complicated because, interestingly enough, I mean, as you said, Sean, you talk about recruiting. How will you tell who is who and who are you bringing on board? But the thing is, according to my experiences, and you can correct me if you don't agree, but most people don't know why they are here, actually. They don't even know their own motivation. They don't understand, well, I need a job, I need to pay my bills and so on. But that's not a good answer. I'm not going to go all Simon Sinek over you here. But if we don't understand why we are here, we are doomed, really. We will mess it up. I have made many mistakes in my own life. I went in my own, I'm an entrepreneur myself. I started my own business, let's see, 1999 with a couple of other dudes. And since 2007, it's just me. Well, family, actually, my wife and two of the sons, and my daughter is working here as well. And also other people. But of course, we are sort of ruling the organization. That is the case. But it took me some time to understand that independence for me was really important. I didn't understand that. Autonomy, yeah, well, I've heard about it, but, you know, also routine work and taking orders, not having to take responsibility was kind of comfortable when I was younger, but I didn't understand. It took me several years to figure it out. And it was also actually a little bit, I would say, it was a bit of a coincidence that I found out, actually. I've done a lot of things, and then I started to write books because of my own need for, let's say, some sort of creativity work, which helped me in my banking career, actually, which sounds really strange. But when I learned that I need to be creative at the same time as being practical and economical, because I am partly driven by money myself, not only money, but if it's not, if the business isn't prosperous, then it's too big of a risk. You need to feel safe, you know. But the thing is, when I started writing books, I sort of balanced my inner self in a way. It sounds a bit weird, this, I understand that. But when I did this on my spare time, at nights, really, when I was traveling, writing actually crime novels, that's where I started. I felt much better also in the bank office, which has nothing to do with each other, but me as an individual. Thomas felt much better about himself. So by understanding my own needs, my own motivational factors, it can really make the difference. And it has taken me on a whole different journey now. So, you know, who knows what life will bring you if you don't try it.
How challenging is that to work with family, considering a lot of our drivers, I imagine, come unknowingly from our family. If I think about my parents, my dad here he's clearly a red. He is, very commanding. He wants to win. He had this joke when I was a child where anytime I would come home from soccer practice, a football game, a theater audition, it doesn't matter, he would say, "Did you win?" And it became things that even where winning wasn't a possibility, he would ask me if I won. Right.
Yeah. You'd come back from a party and say, "Did you win?"
Yeah. You'd come back from a party and say, "Did you win?" And it was our joke, but it was also like there was some truth in it that like that's how he lives his life, and that's why he's done a lot of the great things that he's done. My mom, on the other hand, she had such
she was upset by that question.
That question alone bothered her because she's so motivated by social harmony. She is very much about people oriented. She really wants everyone to have a good time and get along. And so she used to say this thing to me and my sister that would drive us crazy. She would say, like, you should care what or she would say, like, people are going to think this of you if you do that. People are going to think you're rude, or people are going to think you don't care. People are going to think this or that or the other. And my sister and I would always say, well, I don't care what other people think. I'm going to do it my way. And she would always respond with, well, you should. You should care what other people think. And, Dad, on the other hand, would be like, I'm going to go out there and win. And if you think I'm an asshole, then that's on you. But you're going to think I'm an asshole while I have a gold medal around my neck.
Right. Care what other people think is only going to slow you down.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was very two competing ideas. And I don't think that I'm not necessarily 100% in either camp. And it took me a long time because maybe I'm more naturally aligned with red and with my dad than I did with my mom's motivations. But I realized like I'm somewhere more in the middle. Like I think I'm a lot more blue, but I had to kind of find that out on my own. And like, just because I don't always want to win doesn't make me a loser. Right? Just because I don't always want to appease other people doesn't mean that I don't care about them. Yeah.
Now, that's two different things, actually. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing it. But the thing is, if I don't win, that doesn't make me a loser. That is also very true, because if you're not even in the competition, you're not in the game, then most people are losers, because most people do not compete. If you're in the game, you're trying to win and you lose, well, then I guess you're kind of a loser. If you did your best, but I might be an asshole, but I'm still winning. I can't say what's good and what's bad, but also that is also a driver when a motivational factor in this individualistic driver, which is not connected to red behavior, but still okay. Red people usually they like to win, they like to come out on top on any game. If you play, I don't know, table tennis, you drink beers, you play, shoot some pool. Shouldn't we count? That's usually the red guy. We should count. Shouldn't we count? Yeah, let's count. Let's compete. We're only here for recreational matters. We're here to hang out and have a good time. Well, we could count anyway because someone is counting.
Yeah, we could bet $1. Yeah,
sure. Why not? And some people say, well, why? Well, why not? It's a silly question. What do you mean, why? Of course, I understand. Well, I want to win. So, and you can lose friends by being too competitive. I have seen that happen more than once, and I was struggling with that a little bit as a youngster. I was a little bit I had a bad temper too much, and I had to work on it. Seriously, I had to work on my temper, because when I lost, I was not in a good place.
Well, I have found, and I didn't know the terms to attach to it years ago, like a red or driver or whatever it was. But I realized that being that way, being sort of competitive, you will naturally then sort of limit the social connections that you have, because people are less likely to be desirous of being around you as opposed to somebody who
because shockingly, some people joined the high school football team and winning was not on their mind.
Yeah, right. But I found that if I align myself in either a marriage with somebody who is more of the yellow sort of social priorities for them, or in business, there are advisors I will pair with to work with a client, because they will approach that client relationship very differently at the social level, at the caring level, asking questions about family that I maybe would forget to ask because I'm trying to approach different objectives in that business relationship. So I've found that if I'll pair myself with people who complement my strengths, then I get a better result. I get a better client relationship result. I get a better marriage and raising kids because they've got different perspectives that are influencing them.
Yeah,
so I didn't have terms to put with it, but I kind of figured some of that out.
You can call it anything. I mean, when it comes to business, it's kind of interesting because I was training sales reps for 15 years, and as one of you mentioned just now, some people aren't here to win. Really, you're not on the team to win. You're here to hang out and meet your best buddies and so on and so forth. But some people are there to win. When it comes to business, this is a sort of a weirdness in the attitude. You have these salespeople, you have to win. You have to win the game. You have to take the biggest contracts and beat the competitors. You have to blah, blah, blah. You have to. It's a war out there. Well, maybe, but then again, you can also compete with yourself instead of competing with everybody else, because there's always going to be somebody out there that can beat the hell out of you, because someone will be better at everything all the time. But if you compete with yourself, it sounds like a cliche, I understand that, but if you want to, you raise your own budget next year with 5%, and you say, okay, I beat myself. So now I am actually developing. You can use your competitive, let's say, drive, let's call it, in a more constructive manner, I would say. Because if when we are competing, and I've been in this game for many years, when you're competing with the worst, the neighbors on the other side of the street, the one we really, really hate, all those people, they took my big client here, I'm gonna steal something from them. That's usually very bad. It's gonna get on your own nerves, and you're gonna feel bad. You're gonna sleep worse than ever. You're gonna feel really stressed and so on. So I think if you can sort of channel your inner competitor, let's call him or her, towards another kind of competition, it will be really good for you. I mean, like running a business. What are you competing against? Other small businesses? Other family businesses? Are you going to put the Andersons out of business because you want to win, That is usually not a good method. Build your own business. Do better than you did last year. Build your own team. Bring in another guy on the team. And now there's 11 of us. Wow, we are better than last year when we were 9, So we are kind of winning, and celebrate things. Because if you don't have the competitive drive within you or within the organization, you tend not to celebrate the wins. Because even losers sometimes win. Even if you don't compete, you sometimes win and you do really fantastic stuff. And they tend to forget about the celebration. They tend to not buy an extra drink and pop the champagne bottle and say, yay, well, we did it, because it's not important. It's just another day at the office, which is also bad, I would say, because we need the hurrahs when we did a good job. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Well, how do you balance out, though, the necessity for having a sort of a worthy adversary that raises your level of competition because you're competing in a most positive way, versus having that go to sort of a negative place like you're describing?
Most businesses, they don't even have these conversations, I would say. Someone has a business idea. Let's build these things. We're going to make them more beautiful. Gray is out. Okay. We got to make them with flowers. We got to do something. Okay. And then you build your team and you develop and you use some new high tech and you sort of, but you don't, most businesses, they don't discuss why. Again, back to the why question. Why is this important? What are we trying to achieve here? Is this going to contribute to the society in general? Are we going to make money? Is this really helpful? When do we want to be the biggest producers of this stuff in the States? Whatever it is. But have you defined why you do it? And as we touched upon just now, every new character that you bring on board, they are here for some other reason. Some are just here to pay the rent. We need to understand it. But people, it's been so popular to talk about, the basic values. We need to understand our fundamental values and, the basics. We need to have it. Sure. But you need to sort of recharge these things probably every half year or something. Every time you bring someone on board, you're going to bring some other values in there. You're going to have a conversation. For that, you need probably an HR department, which is actually also a bad idea because that's costly, and they are here for a third reason altogether. They are not here to make money either. They are here to deal with people, which is not why you are here. So, the bigger you are, the bigger the problems you get. So I don't know. It's a struggle to make it work.
It sounds like what you're saying is winning can certainly be a component of a team's motivation, but it can't be the only motivation. You have to have a why that's motivating it beneath, and kind of supporting that aim to win. So if we have an objective of we want to be the number one producer in our region, there's still got to be a motivation that's underlying that is speaking to something higher, because we can reach the finish line of becoming the number one producer. And if the only reason we were trying to do that is so we could become the number one producer, it's kind of a vacuous purpose. There's nothing beyond that once we hit it. And along the way, I think we lose motivation by that because we realize it's self-serving. I do it the same thing with clients when it comes to their quote unquote financial goals. Like a lot of our competitors focus on telling clients, hey, we're here to help you meet your financial goals. And in my life, I don't meet a lot of people who have financial goals. And in the case that I do meet people that have financial goals, they are goals that are related to something that is bigger than a goal, some motivation that they have that's beyond the goal itself. They don't want to retire at 62 because that would be beating their friend who retired at 63. Right. That's not why they want to do that. They want to do that so that they can spend more time volunteering at the church. And so that's a higher calling than simply the measurement that we're aiming at. They don't want to buy a vacation home just because it would be cool or it would make them look successful in the eyes of their friends and neighbors. They want to buy a vacation home because having memories outside of their community they grew up in with their family is something that they want to be able to provide for the kids and grandchildren as their children age. So it's a bigger motivation. And in business, if we have a motivation that's got such a concrete finish line to it, like that's good, but it should function more as a measurement of that harder to define aim. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
I guess it is. I have pondered these questions quite a lot, and again, what is being successful? I mean, see, it's a classic question, obviously. How do you define success? And again, it could be money, it could be a good night's sleep, it could be having enough in the bank so I don't have to worry about anything, leaving something behind. It could be, helping the community. It could be solving conflicts. It could be making other people successful. It could be, I guess, 1,000 things, I guess. But what you said there, I think it goes back to what we touched upon before. A lot of people haven't really figured this out. It's not on their agenda. They hear their managers talk about, you need this, you need that, and we have a goal. We're gonna be a number one. Okay, so now you're number one. Are we going to, just get out of business now? Are we selling? Are we, retiring? Now you are number one. And what's the next goal? I don't even think that's a good goal to have. Here in Sweden, we have 4 really big banks, and they are all number one because they measure different things, obviously. So they can all say, hey, we're number one. And I say, well, I don't like any of you because, they are too big for a little guy like me. So they don't care about people like me. But the thing is, the thing is, this conversation is important, but it's also tricky. When you say something like, we want to be number one, well, may I ask, why is this important to you to be number one? Well, then we have won. Well, okay, so why is winning important? Well, it makes me someone. Okay, so what kind of person would you like to be, and for whom is this important? And is this, as you just mentioned, is this in everybody else's perception that now you are something really cool to, now you are a role model? Yeah, I want to be a role model. Okay, so why is that important? When you ask the why question, which is actually not a good question, because when you ask why, it's a bit challenging, and people sort of get a bit defensive when you phrase it, starting the sentence with the word why. Why did you do it? Why didn't you do it? So you have to be a little bit smarter to move around in this conversation a little bit. That would be my recommendation. The why question can be quite negative. But the thing is, when you boil it down, you will usually find the answer to be about, well, to feel good, to just be satisfied. That's the main goal. That is my goal, to feel okay, to feel good, to feel calm, to feel inner peace or something. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. There are a lot of ways we get there. That's sort of one of the deep-seated motivations. And I remember I was working with one of a coaching client years ago on their annual business plan, and they had never done that before. And I said, so, you've got to put some objectives in here. And I started giving him some examples. I said, for example, you want to be number one in the marketplace. You want to reach this level of recognition. You want to, hit this number. And I realized that all of the examples I was giving,
were your motivation.
They were my motivations, coming from a perspective of competition and winning and those types of things. And there was somebody sitting next to them that said, well, what about if we just wanted to be the best place to work, right? And they were a very people-oriented person.
That's a great motivation.
Right. And, somebody else said, well, what about, if we were just, our clients loved us. And I started seeing that there were all these different places people can come from.
Yeah.
That could be objectives that were different from
to your point about the banks. Like, of course, they're all number one because different things are important. Oh, we're number one in revenue. We're number one in customer satisfaction. We're number one in average size of transaction.
Right. Yeah.
We can always go.
They're really looking
motivating.
for the right number. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you heard the story about the Mexican fisherman? Have you heard that one? But it's a good story. Okay. Mexican fishermen stand there with fishing in the ocean, and as the story goes, an American businessman, possibly a banker, says, "Okay, so what are you doing?" "Well, I'm standing here fishing." "Okay, so how do you know when you have enough fish?" "Well, when I can feed my family." "Okay, so then what do you do after you have been fishing?" "Well, then I go to the bar and hang out with my friends, have a couple of beers, and take a siesta." "Okay, fine. You know what you should do?" the businessman says. "You should actually buy a boat." "Oh, well, why do I need a boat?" "Well, then you can, fish more fish. So you can, collect more fish and you can make more money. And then you can buy another boat." "Oh, dear. Sure, but I can't drive two boats at the same time." "No, you hire another guy, to run the other boat. And now as soon as all of a sudden you have a whole fleet of boats, so you can, empty the ocean of fish." "Oh, my," the fisherman says. "Well, then what I'm going to do? Well, you can list the company, I don't know, on some A-list or somewhere, and then you can just sell out, and you can go home with the millions on your pocket." "Oh, wow," the fisherman says. "And then what am I supposed to do after that?" "Well, then you can hang out with your friends and have a couple of beers, take a siesta." And the thing is, you read this and you ha, funny story, but there are a beautiful truth in it. And people don't recognize it until you point it out, because we are so busy being successful, looking successful in other people's eyes. I would suggest that most small family businesses, even the giants like Microsoft or Google or those things, okay, fine, they started in the garage. But it was never really a family business now, was it? Two people from the university got together and started to develop stuff. But when you run family businesses, you need to be in agreement. You have to align yourself. Why are we here? How many people in this business can agree on the following objectives? The basic values, the fundamental reasons why we did this and not that, and so on and so forth. And even within the family, you don't have these discussions because you work really hard. You get up at night, 4:30 in the morning, and then you work until 10 o'clock in the evening. And I've done that myself. I've been there myself, so I'm no better than anyone else. But me and my wife, who happens to be my CEO, she's a force of nature. She really keeps me on track with things. And we discuss these things quite often. And we say, okay, is this a good deal? Should we do this? Should we do that? I mean, she's also an author, a writer. So we have different kinds of projects, and I'm working with online courses, and I'm giving lectures and developing new concepts, and then write another book. And she asked me, well, what book is on the list? Which one should you write? I'm considering this one. Maybe that one. Don't write about these topics. Boring, Yeah, but people ask, well, it doesn't matter. This is better business, And I said, well, we have to find a balance because I like these topics, So, but we discuss it. So, what's going to be the outcome? What's going to happen if you publish that kind of book? If you start another business, if you try to create your own analysis assessment tools, let's say, well, why would you do that? I want to have an app, I say. And she said, why would you want to have an app? Too much work, very, very risky business. You don't know if you get the money back. I said, well, it would be fun to have an app with my name on it. But we talk about these things all the time. With the youngsters also. Well, they're not teenagers anymore, but still. So we tried to keep them on board with why is this important? But as soon as I ask one of the employees, we're back to the other question. They just look at me with sometimes a bit emptiness in their eyes, I guess, and they keep saying, "Yeah, well, I'm leaving at 5 o'clock." What is this? Can't you see the beauty? Yeah, well, good for you. It's like the story. Can you see the little lake down there, and you see the sun coming down there? And wouldn't that be a perfect place for a lovely big summer mansion? I'm going to build me one of those based on your work, And that's what some of them actually see. And this is tricky, but you have to keep the conversation going still, even though it's tricky.
It's so challenging for family businesses because the challenge for getting a team unified in a mission is a lot of times we don't have clear conversations about it because we think so much of it has already been said. I see business owners who they may have a cursory conversation about their values and their mission statement, and they set it on the table and they don't talk about it with their team for 6 months. Hey, so your team's all on the same page? Yeah, we talked about it. Well, you talked about it in the past a while ago and you've never had the conversation again. You've never asked this person what their motivation is. Oh, how well do you know that valued employee of yours? How well do you know her motivations? Oh yeah, I asked her last year. Like that's not good enough.
I sent an email, and they all answered, who read the damn email anyways? Yeah. I mean, again, it's tricky just to define a process that makes this. Ask any business owner, just next time you meet them, just funny question, but why do you do it? Why are you here exactly now at this moment in time doing these things? Why do you do it? And just see the frustration and the sort of because my grandfather. You can inherit a family business also. That's even worse. The expectations. You're the third generation. Ooh. Now it's getting real.
Yeah, and then when you look at it, an individual who's motivated by something like carrying on the family legacy, well, even if we all as a family agree and understand, yes, carrying on the legacy is important. Well, we all have individual interpretations of what that even means. For somebody, it means the specific recipe that grandma used in the kitchen of this Mexican restaurant is we have to maintain that forever. Some of them, it just means as long as we're doing something in the name of this company and we're succeeding and making money and providing a way for us to earn a living, we're carrying on the legacy. And so having a conversation, even when you think you found the motivation, like having that second level conversation of digging past it and going, what do we actually mean by that? What do we mean by what we're saying? Do you find that the motivations that each of you have in your roles as a family, that they deviate to that degree, or are y'all very unified consistently?
That's an interesting question. Let's see if I can elaborate. My wife, Christina, she is And here's the confessor. She's my third wife. Now, what do you know? So don't take relationship advice from me, or do that, because I've tested everything that doesn't work. So I know a lot more than people who only have been married once. But the thing is this, I'm saying this a little bit as a joke, but seriously, I've always had this drive to be an author. I've always been giving lectures and keynotes and all of these things. But the lady who was the mother of my two now grown-up children, she paid no attention whatsoever. She didn't understand it one bit. This doesn't come out really good. I can hear that myself. But anyways, and then there was the one in the middle there, and she didn't get it at all. She just said, yeah, well, you do that. You do whatever. I don't know. I'm over here, you know. But when I met Christina 10 years ago, we were both newly divorced, actually. Both had decided, never again, never, ever. I'm going to be on my own. I'm going to live somewhere on the countryside, in some small building with no running water. I'm going to punish myself. But we met and we realized quite quickly that we are not aligned when it comes to personality style, when it comes to behaviors, our ways of communicating. She's only red, 98% red. She's nothing else, nothing. No yellow, green, blue, just 98% red. And a bit frustrated, didn't I get 100? That's really stupid. What's this silly test? I'm going to have to do it again.
Because red's obviously the best, right?
Yeah, clearly.
Red's I'm at 98. What kind of sucker test is there? I'm going to get 100. Can I get 102? I said, you can't get 102%, really. But, you know, so she's a bit competitive, I would say. Painfully competitive. But she's a force of nature. I'm not like that anymore. I have red and blue and lots of yellow as well. But we have the same drivers. Our motivators are exactly the same, which is really, really helpful. Because when we are working, you know, pulling all-nighters, you know, and we are really, really onto something, we never had to ask the other one, are you okay? Because we know you wouldn't be sitting by your desk if you weren't okay. This is a sign of being okay, because you are onto something and I'm with you 100%. We know why we do, why we travel, why I go to Hong Kong and, you know, I'm off to Australia in August and then I'm going to Singapore and all of these places. And she said, that's fine. When we're going to Paris, I will come along, she says. I don't have time for those, you know, 15 hours flights, you know, forget about that. But she will keep the office in order because we are here for the same reason. And she wants to start a legacy. She wants to start a legacy. We have no legacy before because we didn't inherit anything. We started literally with 2 empty hands. Well, 4 then, I guess. But she wants to start a legacy. I said, that's a beautiful thing. Let's see how many of the kids we can actually, well, bring on board on this, I guess. And 2 of them is starting to understand, this is actually something. I want to build an empire, you know? And she said, yeah, you do that, but it has to live when you're gone. It has to be there when you're not here anymore. So that drives her to work really, really hard. And I totally respect it and I understand it. And we sort of fiddle with these things. But that really helps us to work really, really hard and to put in all the hours needed and to really, really not give up even when the going gets tough. Of course it does, obviously. All the time it feels like, you know. I would say if you could interview anyone, even within your spouse, your partner, if you could interview her or him by saying, what is the most important for you in life, in business, running a business, being an entrepreneur? Why? Is it just to bring grandmother's recipe out to the rest of the world? That might be a good reason if it's the same reason that you have. But if you are here to make, you know, multi-million-dollar deals, you will find yourself in some sort of a dead end sooner or later, and it's not going to work. Because when the going gets tough, you need the same reason, because you need a collaboration. You need a cohesive team. You just have to have it. I'm not trying to be, you know, it's nothing hallelujah about this. It's hard work, but if you don't bring up, I would say this sense of purpose, this mission statement, call it whatever, if you don't have it around the dinner table weekly, I think you're going to lose it. I think you need it up there. It doesn't have to be world-conquering hallelujah. No. It can be something small, but you have to keep it alive.
What would you say is your, just a final question, what would you say is your top decision-making tip for business owners?
I would say going back to this thing about the self-awareness, realize where you're weak when it comes to decision-making. Some people are too impatient and they don't bring in the data they need to make a smart enough decision. They just do something and then they have to fix the mess. If you're one of those people, work on your patience. Some people are too spontaneous. They see something novel, something new, and just, yay, whoa, let's start this thing. Let's start this business. Let's bring that guy on. I liked him. I don't know anything about him. You're too spontaneous. You need to consider. You need to bring up the Excel sheets a little bit. If you are in the other corner, if you're, let's say, you're green, let's say you're looking for stability, then the biggest risk is that you don't take any decisions at all. You just postpone the decision making. You sleep on it, and then you sleep on it some more. If you know that you have that tendency within you, make any decision. Break it down in bits and pieces. Make just any decision. And if you're the analytical guy, prone to details and numbers and facts and statistics, just understand that you are working too hard on the preparations. Leave the starting blocks. Do something. Start somewhere. You don't need another book. You don't need another seminar. You don't need another podcast. Just do something. Please go and do some action. If you understand who you are in this perspective, you could do much better when it comes to decision making.
Yeah. But thanks so much for being here. Where can people connect with your work, Thomas?
They find me, my website, surroundedbyidiots.com, obviously, and there you can find all my social media. I'm on TikTok these days, writer Thomas Erikson or Thomas Erikson Writer. Instagram, LinkedIn, Thomas Erikson. If you Google Surrounded by Idiots, the book, I'm hard to miss, frankly, and I'm sorry if I offend anyone. So, yeah.
Thanks for being here. I learned a lot.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Appreciate it.
My takeaway from is something we've talked about before, but we got a little deeper on it, and that is that when you look at assessing your own strengths, let's say, your own values, those types of things, you're going to have those differences when you're building a team. But you need to make sure that you have the same underlying motivation, that everybody's there for the same reason, and that you ought to be asking what that motivation is. A lot of times we look for technical skills or other strengths or those types of things. We fail to ask what that underlying motivation is. And then he made an interesting point about making sure that not only do we ask that motivation and find out what it is, but that we're recommitting and reaffirming to that motivation on a pretty regular basis. So I thought that was good.
That's interesting. My takeaway was a little bit different, but in the same vein, that what I got from the conversation was that our motivations don't need to be the same, but our individual motivations need to attach to a unified motivation or a unified driver. And so you may have people who are motivated by money or autonomy or doing good in the world. And all three of those people can coexist on the same team as long as the unifying mission of the company allows them to individually express those motivations within their roles.
Yeah.
You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision by subscribing to the show and leaving us a 5-star review wherever you're listening. We appreciate the support. It helps business owners like you find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com, on Instagram at decidedlypodcast, or grab a copy of Sanger and Sean's books from the links in the show notes. Finally, we'd like to thank Shelby Peterson of Transcend Media for editing and post-production of the show. Thanks for listening. I'm Morgan, your producer, and this is Decidedly.